It was godless times, those hiatuses. I saw things. Things that made no sense. Strange ideas lived in the gaps between episodes. As long as he doesn't do anything, immediately early on in A Tale to Stand to dissuade the viewer of that, I'm sure we'll all get along swimmingly, and everyone will... Wait, what was that? He immediately punches Stan in the face?
Brother!
For a guy who'll supposedly change everything we know and understand, he sure spends a lot of time off-screen in his basement, jacking off to Nikola Tesla X-Spock fanfiction or whatever the fuck he was doing down there. In the same scene, the Cycloptopus, with funny comedic timing, jumps on Ford's face. I thought you didn't want the Cycloptopus to taste human flesh. This just confirms that you were lying earlier. You're letting it suck you... Nope, that's not the right word choice. That's... I'm not gonna keep that in. I'm not a coward, I'm keeping that in. You were letting those tentacles suck you dry, Ford. He doesn't trust a lot of people, so he tells Dipper to keep it a secret. Don't tell anyone in the household. And no, this can't just be because he has trust issues or because he thinks it's dangerous and he doesn't know what'll happen if word gets out about it. It needs to be because... why would a grown adult tell a child to keep a secret? There's no good that could come of this. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of various other situations in which an adult might tell a child to keep something nefarious a secret. Yes, there were people on Tumblr who thought that this was an allegory for grooming. The only other scene with Ford in this episode is when he gives Dipper the mind control tie, and oh no, I can already hear the comments. What do you mean use it responsibly? That's a child. You're giving a child a weapon of mind control. What's wrong with you? Why are you conditioning Dipper to be as manipulative as you are? And also, wait, that mind control tie helped put Ronald Reagan in office? Do you like Ronald Reagan? Ford, are you responsible for the 1980s, 1990s AIDS crisis? If you're exhausted listening to this, I want you to imagine what it was like living through it. People found a way to make the light bulb sinister. Where so many in the fandom saw an evil, child-manipulating, abusive, irredeemable monster. The series left us with an Icarus metaphor. Also, guys, this is so unfair. If you want to show the picture of Stan punching the zombies, you gotta use, the dice fingering picture for Ford, or the post-portal Ford, or something that could at least compete. Come on, you gotta give us something to work with. What I'm saying right now is that it doesn't make you a little freak if you project on fictional characters. That's all good and fine. Projection is probably one of the most human things that there is. They would sometimes just, completely make up things that they did. Things that just, literally didn't happen. The obvious one that comes to mind for me is the Schmebulok theory. They saw Ford talking to a gnome that only said its own name, and they were like, oh my god, I can't believe Ford would torture a gnome.
It's fiction. We made it up. We made this one up.
Do you guys think that Stan would really ask your pronouns? He doesn't know what a pronoun is. What is he, a fucking nerd? He's anti-noun. Forget about that. I have read not one, but 2 popular fanfictions where Ford purposefully kills Fiddleford's raccoon wife. These motherfuckers have him committing animal cruelty on purpose. Speaking of which, we're getting into the big one. He closed the curtains, and he didn't stop Philbrick from kicking Stanley out. Whew, oh boy, let's do this. What I'm tempted to do is just say he was 17 next and move on, but we're not going to do that. We're going to actually engage with it. Let's go. Stolen indigenous artifacts. This one's mine. I just threw one in here. No one said this but me. It's my video. I make the rules. I'm putting this one in for fun because not a single person on that goddamn hell site has mentioned in any of their posts about Ford that he was a white man with stolen indigenous artifacts in his basement and in his study. Y'all didn't even bother trying. There's gonna be a lot of things on this list that Ford didn't even do that y'all just made up, so I thought I'd throw one on there that he did actually do that no one cares about. That's all. Like, he not only knew that Stan was homeless, but he thinks that Stan deserves it. You decode the rectangles in Journal 3 and it's like, Dear Diary, I wish my brother was dead. Every time I see a poisonous mushroom, I think of him eating it. Every morning I pray to God to kill him, and every night I cry, 'cause God hasn't done it yet. And I know that he's still alive, because I keep tabs on him, just to make sure that he's just as starving and homeless as I'd hoped. Sometimes I'll send over a gnome that I'm torturing just to steal his socks. What he tried. He had the resolve. He was going to do it. He sat down, and then he just couldn't. This was everything he had accomplished in the last 6 years. And at the end of the day, if he did burn them, if he did get rid of the journals, then he would have gone through everything that Bill put him through and had nothing to show for it.
You ruined your own life! Ah! Stanley! Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Are you all right?
I mean, I probably wouldn't even apologize that quickly, because I would need at least a few seconds to process what had just happened. Look at his face here. He feels horrible.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Are you...
Even if that is a possibility, is it bad that he stops because children are watching? He only stops for manipulative, nefarious purposes. Well, in that case, Ford, go ahead and punch him. Stanford Pines, you better stop virtue signaling and beat your brother to death in front of these children this instant. As for why it's hard for him to trust people, I guess I have no idea why. I can't think of anything in Ford's life that would make it difficult for him to trust anyone. Really, honestly, his whole life has been nothing but people being kind and open-hearted to him. He never once implies that he feels anything for Mabel other than love. So where do people get the idea that he hates her? Nowhere!
We made this one up. It never happened. It never happened. It's fiction.
But also, he's only in like 7 episodes or something. He doesn't have much screen time with anyone. Period. Does the fact that he doesn't have screen time with Seuss means that he harbors a deep hatred of Seuss? Oh man, would you look at that? It looks like we got to the end of the list. Just kidding. Yeah, we're gonna be here for a while. And then just kind of tells him, use it responsibly and all. And then Dipper proceeds to not use it responsibly. He and Mabel manage to not only emotionally scar Seuss, but commit... I mean, I think this is election fraud. I think if the guy running for office is secretly another guy, I think that's election fraud.
If you're so sure of what you want out of life, why wait? Why put up with the drudgery of school?
Oh, so when he implies to Dipper that he can give him a specialized education so that Dipper can skip the K-12 drudgery, it's suddenly horrible and awful and dismissive of the importance of secondary education. But when Ford wants to go to West Coast Tech, it's just a school? Why is he so upset about losing that opportunity? Okay, y'all. Ford and Stan are in their 60s. They don't think communication is real. They think communication is something made up by the liberals at Big Communication to sell you more communication. Wake up, sheeple. But at this point in the video, if you hate Ford, you're probably gonna keep hating, and that's fine. Like I said, my job isn't to change your mind. I'm just here to talk about my boy. Would I keep the photo of someone I thought was a bumbling leech in my jacket for 30 years? If I thought someone was nothing more than a bumbling leech, would I write in the margins of my diary about how I wonder how he's been, and about how we used to go camping in the Pines Barrens looking for the Jersey Devil? Would I say that my favorite place in Gravity Falls is the lake because it reminds me of my memories with that bumbling leech on the beach we used to grow up on? Being so egotistical that he falls for Bill's lies in the first place. Basically, that Ford wouldn't have been a victim of Bill if he didn't deserve it. And in Ford's case, it was being told he was smarter than everyone else. Let me tell you guys something, and I genuinely believe this to be true. If someone thinks of themselves as the smartest person, as the most competent person, as the brightest bulb in a room of very dim bulbs, they don't need a demon to tell them that. When Bill gets summoned by Ford, Bill is overjoyed because Ford has all of the qualities that make someone easy to prey upon. And that isn't Ford's ego. It's the fact that Ford is deeply insecure and that he's isolated himself away from anyone who might be able to steer him away from Bill's plans. Do you guys recognize this language? Because it's the language that people used in 2015 to describe Ford. It's the language of an abuser. He speeds up Ford's mind when it's sluggish, and he slows it down when he's anxious. Bill is purposefully creating an environment where Ford is dependent on him. At the end of the day, we don't blame victims for making themselves the easy targets of predators. Though I guess if we didn't want Ford to be manipulated by Bill, he shouldn't have dressed like such an easy target. You can dislike a quality about someone without saying that it means they deserve abuse because of it. Ford wakes up on the roof of his house in a blizzard with the knowledge that he could have been pushed off the roof, but the only reason he didn't is because Bill considers him to be a plaything, a toy. Quote, "You're my property." I don't think a single one of Ford's sins on the list, whether you think he did them or not, warrants this much punishment. I don't think all of them put together warrant this much punishment. Not this, not Bill, his abuser, coming back after 30 years, not Weird McGidden, and especially not losing his brother. And if anyone listening to this does believe that Ford deserved this, deserved any of this, I don't get you. Maybe a whiteboard list of every sin that Ford's ever had isn't the best methodology to present to you if I'm trying to defend him, because is this how you define a person? Do you just leave a tally mark of everything they've ever done and see if it's a net positive in the end? Is that how humanity works? You guys don't know what he's up against, what he's been through. I'll say it, I don't think Ford's done anything wrong. Ford came in, slammed open the door, and told him that Fiddleford was brilliant. This, to me, does not read like a dynamic of someone taking advantage of someone just wanting a follower around. This, to me, reads as Ford recognizing that Fiddleford was someone that people didn't believe in, recognizing the shame and the hurt that came from that, and deciding to be the person that Fiddleford needed the most. Now, how much of this is Ford being an inconsiderate person, and how much of this is Ford being some guy in the 80s without a clear understanding of mental illness or the impacts of PTSD? It's hard to know for sure. The differences between Bill and Fiddleford and the way that they express affection for Ford are stark, and I think that the holiday special is a good illustration of it. Fiddleford loves Ford unconditionally. He hand knits Ford a pair of gloves after making several prototypes. He creates a handmade snow globe of the lab. These are gifts that you give to someone who you know very well and care a lot about. And when Fiddleford returns to Gravity Falls after the fight with Emma May, we see that this affection isn't one-sided. Ford, someone who really dislikes the holidays, stops work on Bill's portal and throws Fiddleford a Christmas bash to cheer his friend up. They spend the whole night making snowmen and drinking and having fun together. And then we have Bill, and Bill's response after the holiday special.
Fiddleford?
Let's take Ford's behavior here head on. His friend goes through an interdimensional portal, something they don't even know is functional yet. Ford has no way of knowing what this could even do to a human body. And we know this because they weren't even done testing it on a test dummy yet. And he pulls Fiddleford through, and Fiddleford crashes on the floor. And while we don't know if Ford kind of shook Fiddleford's shoulder or cradled his body. Shout out to the last Mabelcorn. We don't know exactly how it went down, but we do know that Ford didn't ask Fiddleford if he was okay. And Ford seems to have mastered repression. He seems to have mastered not thinking about it, not talking about it. He's learned meditation exercises for a reason. I can see Ford as someone who, at least while living in the woods, not interacting with anyone, can convince himself that he's overcome this, that he's past his anxiety. After all, he doesn't let it stop him from investigating the weird. It's not getting in the way of science, so it's not an issue, right? He's overcome it. Why can't you? But it's very clear to me that Ford, while he wasn't the friend that he should have been, didn't do it on purpose, and years later, deeply, deeply regrets it. He regrets it as soon as he realizes what Bill has been up to. There isn't a moment after he finds out his mistake that Ford goes, but actually I was right about all that. Like, Ford is deeply apologetic about the way that it shook out with Fiddleford. He's sorry. He thinks it again and again and again. So this is the thing about this line. Ford was writing in his diary after having a fight with his best friend. I'm sorry, but when you have a fight with your friend, are you saying nice things about them in your diary? No, you're calling them a stanky bitch. You're going full Regina George. Fiddleford McGucket is the nastiest skank Ford's ever seen, and that's going in the burn book. Look at this phrasing. Go back to your doting family. Go back to a household of people who love and accept you. Ford isn't just mad, he's jealous. He's bitter. He's resentful. He sees Fiddleford as leaving him for the thing that Ford wants more than anything. Acceptance. Maybe we can even say he was being self-centered. But I don't think we can say that Ford ruined Fiddleford's life. Something that people are eager to say. And they'll find any reason to say it. Hell, I saw a post saying that Ford gave Fiddleford a caffeine addiction by forcing him to drink coffee? Like Fiddleford is a baby and Ford force-fed him Red Bulls like a foie gras goose? Y'all gotta calm down with the infantilization of people with anxiety, y'all. Fiddleford is grown. He's a father. Does a fictional character doing a bad thing, especially a bad thing that character regrets, and, a bad thing where the viewer can understand the factors that led to that decision, does that character doing that thing make them a bad person? How long does the stink of these mistakes follow that character? What needs to happen before people on the internet can say that they love that character? What do y'all want? Because if it's an apology, it's worth noting that Ford does apologize to Fiddleford, and he does apologize to Stan. Because it's very possible to have a discussion about the ways that Ford treated Fiddleford, but does all of this relegate Ford to a terrible, horrible, bad person beyond redemption? My anxiety about it gets even wilder when y'all are out here attacking things for things that he didn't do. You gotta stop saying that Ford caused the AIDS crisis, guys. I'm drawing the line somewhere. You can't blame him for the AIDS crisis, you overcooked egg yolk of a person. You can't do that. Taking the journal would be the first worthwhile thing he's ever done in his life. And when I hear that, part of me wants to scream, he hasn't slept in weeks and his body isn't his own, and Bill Cipher is hammering his hand with nails and making him forget his mother's face and making him forget his own name. He's waking up on the roof in the freezing cold and he thinks he's responsible for the end of the world. And y'all are mad that he's not nice to his brother? He's got bigger fish to fry. But the truth of the matter is that I don't love Stanford Pines because I think he's done nothing wrong. I love him because I understand why he did the things he did. Now it's my turn to project. Mom said it's my turn with the Xbox. I understand that Stanford Pines isn't real. I understand he's not my abusive ex. He's not my college professor. Stanford Pines is not my dad. A resentment that comes from a lifetime of not fitting into these spaces and realizing that there's just no place for you, no home where you belong, because you're not normal enough, or wealthy enough, or charismatic enough. And maybe you, or the writers of the show, might describe Ford's narrative as one of self-destruction, of how one man ruined his life through his ego and self-aggrandizement. But that version of the story isn't just so much simpler to me than what we get in the series, but it's so much less interesting than what we get in the series. How much they knew he would resonate with people who grew up in his circumstances. Awkward, poor, socially inept, growing up in the shadow of someone with much more personality. And of course, being told by an educational system that he would need to earn a place in a society where he was respected. And then putting all his chips on that slot because he learned not to see himself as deserving respect without that. Ford saying, he can't possibly settle down. I read this and I believe that the meta-narrative is almost punishing Ford for this. It's not an official sin. It's not on the official list of things he did wrong. I'm not going to put it on the whiteboard. But I can't help but feel like the writers thought that another answer would be more correct, more moral. Like if Ford had said, oh yeah, I honestly don't really want to solve the mysteries of Gravity Falls. I actually would rather just cash out now and, write a paper on the abominable bromance and get married or whatever. And the truth is sometimes trauma makes people act in upsetting and selfish ways. Sometimes a lifetime of survival and traumatic experiences robs people of the bandwidth necessary to let others in and to prioritize other people's needs. After years of needing to think about yourself, you forget to think about others. Selfishness is learned out of necessity. And an audience member might say, he should have done something else instead. He shouldn't have treated Fiddleford like that. He shouldn't have thought that about Stanley. And yeah, of course, you're right. But one, where would he learn that? He was raised to think that his worth was contingent on his wealth, on his charisma, on his social capital that he doesn't have. And he was reassured that because he was smart, he could make up for it. And two, if he did everything right, I don't think there would be much there to relate to. So things get potentially messy when I say things like, Ford definitely has PTSD. Because yes, a person who has gone through the things that Ford has gone through would almost definitely not walk away unscathed. But I don't know for sure if the writers meant to write a man living with PTSD. That being said, this man has PTSD. Say what you want about Alex Hirsch's old statements about Ford or about how the show treats his paranoia like a character flaw, but it's never treated like a moral flaw. Ford's paranoia and lack of trust in others isn't something he needs to morally correct about himself. It's an obstacle keeping himself from happiness, keeping himself from friends, keeping himself from family. And it's an obstacle that is shown directly to be inflicted on him by his trauma, intrinsically tied to both Bill Cipher and the science fair incident that cost him a lot as a young person. Lashing out in anger and sadness or a lack of empathy or understanding of it is a symptom, and the example they use is Ford yelling at Stanley after being cost his dream school, which, that's up for interpretation. I think just about anyone would lash out in anger or sadness. I think lashing out when you're angry is just kind of a thing people do. But okay, moving on. I'm about to read you some comments on the original TikTok and some posts about the headcanon that have been posted to Tumblr, Reddit, and Twitter in the days since, which I'm sure are all trying to have a very balanced and nuanced conversation about NPD. You mean you didn't notice it? For him, people are just a product, a way to achieve his personal goal, a field for experiments. He'll literally cross any morals for the sake of knowledge and science. Maybe we'll be fine. Give me the rift. He can't comprehend the need for human connection. It's classic NPD, honestly, for real. The way he throws Stan away and has no problem only calling him if he needs something, he only thinks his needs are important. He doesn't know how to love. He doesn't know how to love. I don't remember that symptom in a DSM-5, but okay. NPD isn't the evil disease, I just think Ford has it on account of all the evil that he does. I think an equivalent example would be if someone without autism headcanoned Ford as having autism by saying, not that autism makes you stupid or evil or thoughtless or anything, that he just didn't understand that those things were harmful and mean, because you all know how autism is. Like, fellow neurodivergent people in the chat, wouldn't you feel skeptical if someone did that? Have you ever been dismissive of a friend's bad day or something bad that happened to them? Have you ever lashed out in anger when something that mattered a lot to you fell apart because of the actions of someone else, whether it was intentional on their part or not? Haven't you ever just said something mean without realizing you'd done it, just had a social snafu like that? Is it only because you have trauma and mental illness? Because I'm sorry, but all of us have trauma or mental illness, or at least 1 in 4 of us do. Here's a fun prompt for the comment section down below. If someone saw a list of your worst mistakes or the meanest things you've ever said and done, which cluster B personality disorder would you be armchair psychology diagnosed with? How Bill calls Stan PTSD Barnum on the website, which, funny joke, underrated joke, people don't talk about it enough. I think that one's a good bit. Don't hurt people, we're all in agreement. Being shitty is shitty. But does that mean that we ignore that it can be a symptom when we're talking about characters having it? You want to know what fics I read that did include Ford having PTSD and also included him occasionally lashing out at others or being angry or being aggressive? Fics written by people who don't like Ford. It's like, we love mentally ill characters until they start showing signs of mental illness, in which case, it's a sign that they're evil, actually. Does it mean that there's a point where I'm sad and mentally ill and traumatized enough to get away with mistreating someone? Is there a point when I'm sad and traumatized and mentally ill enough that I'm a lost cause? Where I'm a poison to the people around me, and there's no treatment, there's no helping it? Oops, all shittiness. Don't blame my personality disorder for everything bad I've ever done. It really belittles all the hard work I've put into ruining my own goddamn life. I very often see fans of Stan and Ford alike try to justify every bad thing they've done by emphasizing how sad they were when they were doing it. Not all of Stan and Ford's actions are caused by trauma or even related to it. Like, did Ford dig up indigenous artifacts because of his childhood bullying? Did he kick the leprechaun because he was raised in a poor family? Did Stan try to burn little Gideon because of his PTSD and because of his experiences as a homeless person? Did he abandon Lazy Susan on their date because of some deep-seated hidden experience with a woman with a lazy eye? Because a woman with a lazy eye killed my grandma, okay? Because even in this way, we can't have our characters have any conflict. Why did they cut out Aang running away? Why did they cut out Zuko actually burning down Kyoshi Island? Why did they cut out Sokka being a misogynist? To prevent Twitter discourse? Outright refusal to make non-villainous characters messy or just do bad things sometimes is making media worse, honestly. I want my fictional men like I like my bedroom. Messy as hell. Like, I can pretend that he didn't feel that when he wrote it. But I also think it's more interesting if he did feel it. If that anger was still in there after all those years. Because doesn't that do more for his character than just chalking it up to the circumstances that he existed within? And they put up this layer of separation between this is what makes this person a bad person as opposed to a good person like me who would not do this. I think that in introducing these degrees of distinction, they fail to recognize their own potential to be thoughtless or hurtful or mean. This is an act of an abuser. This is an act of a monster. This is an act of a narcissist. I mean, Gordy was traumatized, and to my knowledge, he's never mistreated his friends or done anything wrong. I don't think he's terrible, but even if I did, it would still be okay to resonate with him. Fictional characters don't need to be moral all the time for you to be allowed to like them. Just like you don't need to make an argument that they're morally wrong for you to hate them. You can just hate him. After spending 6 months editing this video, I hate Ford too. Probably more than anyone. Let's see what it looks like when we talk about Stan the way we talk about Ford. Oh, he watches baby fights? You mean he gets his sick kicks from watching children fight one another? He was a con artist? Don't you know that some of the biggest victims of cons are the elderly? Why don't you care about the elderly? Isn't it kind of possessive that he wants Ford to stick around and be his friend instead of going to college? I don't know. It seems kind of abusive to me. He spends all of summer lean trying to terrify 2 children to give them trauma on purpose. What is he, a sociopath? A narcissist? A narcissist sociopath? Oh no! Like, if you're someone who thinks that Ford is a genuinely bad, horrible, terrible person, then the Gravity Falls that you experienced is different than the one that I experienced, and I think you might have missed out. Because the Gravity Falls that you watched includes a man who is mean-spirited, who is purposefully cruel to children, or at least apathetic to their suffering, and who truly believes that his brother is a worthless leech. And that version of Gravity Falls ends with that man going on a boat with his brother and having the adventure of a lifetime? And you think that that's a satisfactory ending? That version of Ford sucks. And you left him alone in the ocean with Stan. Stan, watch out! He has a cluster B disorder and a gun! Oh no! And you know what I do find compelling? Sometimes genuinely good people just do shitty things. Sometimes they are thoughtless, sometimes they are inconsiderate, sometimes they are selfish, and sometimes they're so tunnel visioned that they don't even realize they've done it. But sometimes they change.